You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 21st of October 2025 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting to you live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Tom Edwards. Coming up on today's programme, Sanae Takaichi has been elected as Japan's first female Prime Minister. Our Fiona Wilson is in Tokyo. What does this mean for the country and its politics, Fiona?
It's a fascinating moment. We'll be looking at her cabinet picks, those early picks, and what it means for the wider region.
More from Fiona on the way in just a moment. We'll be in Paris too to hear from Monocle's own Tyler Brûlé, and we'll rattle through today's LATAM front pages. Fernando Augusto Pacheco is here. Faye, what have you spotted?
Hello, Tom. We discuss today Bolivia's shift to the right and the appeal of the caramelo dog in Brazil.
Looking forward to that, Faye. That is all to come here on The Briefing with me, Tom Edwards. A very warm welcome to this Tuesday edition of the programme. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are. But it is in Japan that we start. The country has a new leader. Sanae Takaichi has been elected as the country's first female Prime Minister after a bit of toing and froing, marking what is nevertheless a historic moment in Japanese politics. Let's get the latest from Monocle's Tokyo Bureau Chief and Senior Asia Editor, Fiona Wilson, who I'm delighted to say joins us on the line now from our Tokyo Bureau. Good evening, Fiona. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you, Tom.
Tell me, do you feel, empowered, transformed, somehow, better because your adopted motherland has its first female PM, or not quite?
No, you know what I do? I know all the kind of caveats, the objections, but it's absolutely amazing to see a woman becoming Prime Minister here, first woman to become Prime Minister, and that is something to be celebrated. So I noticed there's an awful lot of commentary already saying she's not the right kind of woman, she's too right-wing or whatever, but actually, it's a great symbolic moment for Japan, and it just, it really changes the picture, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty extraordinary. Let's talk a bit about what's in the in-tray, because it's not going to be easy, and you've already alluded to some of these issues. Of course, she's going to be leading a coalition, LDP, the Japan Innovation Party, but as I understand it, they're still just shy of an outright majority, so they'll need to be bringing, a few independents along for the ride. That is pregnant with all sorts of other attendant problems and challenges, isn't it, Fiona?
I mean, nobody would want to be in her position, quite frankly. No, it's really difficult. As you say, a coalition, and it's a very fresh coalition as of yesterday. So that's not exactly cemented very firmly. And yet it's a minority government, which in itself presents all sorts of problems. And Japan has loads of things that it's thinking about. The economy has to be her top priority, and I think it will be. Now, how she tackles Japan's current weak economy, people are complaining about prices rising. We've talked about that a lot. Wages are not keeping up with that. So people are feeling that crunch. That's what she's really got to deal with. And she's got to really keep people happy. I think there's been quite a lot of discontent among the public about that. She's not unpopular, actually, among the public. And issues that we've often talked about, her opinion on this, on foreign policy or on, these traditional kind of social issues, are actually less important to most people than the economy. And it's interesting to see who she is selecting for her cabinet. That is what everyone's now looking at. And that's where the attention is now. And it is an interesting mix. It's a mix. I mean, she is not going for the obvious. She's not going for all her supporters. The old style would have been to really stick with the old factions, all the people who helped you. She's offering positions to all the people who stood against her. So maybe that's where we need to start and see that she is looking to make this government a broad church.
Well, that is super interesting, Fiona. And obviously that makes sense, I guess, on a short-term strategic level, to show that you can actually turn out to be a unity candidate, even though you're perceived as being, this kind of Abe acolyte, bit of a right-winger. But I guess, again, in terms of the mechanics, what's the logic? It's better to have all of these guys on the inside pissing out than on the outside pissing in. Does that actually work if you're trying to do the business of actually administrating your government?
Yeah, that's one, theory, keep your enemies close. But I think actually, the truth is that the LDP is a very divided party. That became very obvious during the leadership election. It's very fractured. Japan is itself a bit divided at the moment. There was these right-wing parties that had never really made any kind of appearance at a serious level had suddenly started to do rather well, say, in the upper house election, and they have to consider all these bits of Japan. And I think that's what people are saying. That's the immediate reaction. It's an all-Japan cabinet. Now, how it works practically is obviously very difficult. You've also got the relationship with the neighbours. So it's interesting that she's picked Shinjiro Koizumi, who's seen as a sort of modern young face. He stood against her. He was her greatest rival. He's the pick for defence minister, which is an interesting choice. And another rival, Motegi, who stood against her, also is potentially foreign minister. So these are, I think there's a bit of continuity, and a lot of what people are looking for is stability. This collapse of the LDP has been rather unsettling for Japan, which is just used to the LDP running the show.
Tell me about presentation, because we were speaking, I think, around this time last week, Fiona, weren't we, when it looked like she was potentially going to take over, about optics, about semantics, about, the style of her rhetoric even, and the fact that, she'd attended certain controversial sites. Would she do it if she got the big job, etc.? What are we expecting to see as she begins to actually make her in early pronouncements? I think there's a big presser tonight, perhaps. Maybe that's already happening. What are you expecting in terms of her personal style? Do you think she'll be eager again, a bit like with these elections, to pivot a little? Is she going to stick to her established kind of tenets that have underpinned her political career so far? What should we expect from her personally?
Well, I think the cabinet picks are the biggest indicator that she is not going in this ultra-right direction. I think that's the headline that's been, it's sort of easy headline in a way, the Iron Lady. We talked about that last week. We know she's an admirer of Margaret Thatcher. And it's very easy to pin these labels. The cabinet pick speaks to something slightly different. Now, what she says about China, Taiwan, that's an interesting matter. She's a great supporter of Taiwan. China has already come out to sort of comment on that, and that they hope that Japan sticks to the current line. And it's interesting. So last week, she would normally have gone to Yasukuni Shrine, this very controversial shrine to the war dead. We often speak about it. It causes absolute fury when a Japanese leader goes there. Ishibo absolutely wouldn't, her predecessor. She didn't go last week. She sent an offering, which is what Shinzo Abe always used to do. It's a sort of indication of support without trying to provoke the neighbours. And she didn't go last week, which I think is another indication. Look, Japan does not need an argument with China and South Korea. This is a difficult time economically, and the Japanese economy is completely enmeshed there. So it would be absolute madness to be provoking unnecessary confrontations with China or South Korea at the moment.
Yeah, maybe a welcome bit of pragmatism. Fiona, absolutely fascinating to get your take. I'm sure we'll check in again with you in the coming days here on Monocle Radio to get more reaction as we see her government taking shape. That was Monocle's Fiona Wilson in Tokyo. Thanks to her very much for joining us here on The Briefing. Plenty going on around the world. Next up, let's cross over to hear from Laura Kramer, who's standing by with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Tom. A drone attack has hit Khartoum International Airport just one day before it was due to reopen for domestic flights. The airport has been closed for more than 2 years because of fighting between Sudan's army and the Rapid Support Forces. Officials have not yet said who was behind the strike. Turkey's President Erdogan is touring the Gulf, visiting Kuwait, Qatar, and Oman. He's seeking to strengthen ties and sign several new deals, including a plan to buy 24 used Eurofighter jets. The trip comes as Turkey looks to boost trade and defense cooperation in the region. And Jin from BTS has become Spotify's most streamed K-pop artist of the year. His song Don't Say You Love Me has been played more than 500 million times. It's also spent 3 months in Spotify's global top 10, the first K-pop track to do so this year. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you very much indeed, Laura. We'll have more news headlines coming your way at the top of the next hour, of course. Now let's train a LATAM lens on the day. I'm joined here in the studio by Monocle's senior correspondent, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Good afternoon, Fernando.
A pleasure to be here, Tom.
Now tell me, plenty going on. You've promised me this is absolutely brimful, your in tray, with interesting stories. Shall we start with some elections?
Absolutely. To be honest, I think Latin America is on fire, literally, when it comes to stories. But we start in Bolivia. I think this story is fascinating, Tom, because, of course, the whole continent had shifts to the right, to the left. But Bolivia, to be honest, stayed 2 decades under a leftist government, with Evo Morales and more recently Luis Arce, not anymore. So they just had a runoff presidential vote over the weekend. And an interesting thing here, Tom, was center-right against right. The left didn't even manage to go to the runoff. So the new Bolivian Congress they will have a very diminished presence there. But let's talk about the winner. It was Rodrigo Paz. He's the more centrist of the two candidates. His father is a former president, Jaime Paz Zamora. So he's very much pro-business. He wants to reconnect with the U.S. And I wonder perhaps if he was elected as well with the support of those voters who previously voted left, but they didn't want to go Argentina to go full Javier Milei, if you know what I mean, right?
And tell me, Fernando, it's interesting, the spectre of the US looms large, and obviously with Milei we've seen this big currency trade, Trump getting very hands-on with people who are kind of his guys, in quotes. Is this a bit of sort of weird foreign policy pragmatism here? Almost these countries, the electorates acknowledging that a bit of a right-leaning pivot is necessary, but Bolivia being like, everything within reason, right, and not going all the way. It's unusual. So often we see these pivots and people do tend to go to the ultra-nationalist, ultra-isolationist. There seems like there's some political pragmatism here. Does that, listen, it's hard to say, but do you think that stands Bolivia in better stead potentially, especially on the world stage?
Absolutely. So they are indeed getting closer to the US, but not in a radical way as well, because I think people are wary as well in Latin America because they know Trump himself is a divisive character and things changed, every time. Marco Rubio already said great things about Rodrigo Paz. But the thing is, Bolivia had a terrible relationship with the U.S. I believe in 2008, the U.S. ambassador in the country was expelled. So it was really not good. And I think one of the reasons why the left is diminished here is because the country is in an economic crisis at the moment. Not only that, but the left itself had some sort of infighting going on. Evo Morales against Luis Arce. And as you know, Tom, the left, sometimes they tend to do that. But that's terrible. And that's why the right gets into the power.
And it's funny because I don't know where you're alluding to, but obviously we've had that even in this country where the left, it can't decide whether it wants to lurch, to this sort of extreme socialist position. I don't know. In Bolivia, as you said, it's quite entrenched that seems to be an innate tendency to lean that way. Does it need to go through decades of infighting, or do you think it can probably course correct quite easily? I guess we'll have to wait and see to a degree.
I think this one is a good course correct, and I'm very suspicious of people saying these days, there's a pink tide of leftist governments or the opposite, the right ones. I think the scene in Latin America now is so complex. You have countries where you have quite a sensible right movement, or you have populist, and even to the left. Let's talk here about Lula, very much a moderate here. I mean, you can't really compare Lula with someone like Maduro, for example. So it's a much more complex situation than just those tides we hear now and then in the foreign press.
Well, Faye, let's dive into some of that complexity. You mentioned Milei already, and it's interesting. In Argentina, we've got voting this weekend in legislative elections, various seats in different chambers, which you can tell us about. But it's interesting, Milei's riding the wave of this Trumpism and this big deal, but difficulties internally, domestically for him. It's going to be a test nevertheless, despite the good headlines on the world stage for him from the last week.
It would be very challenging for Milei. So, first of all, Tom, a few weeks ago, he had quite a big defeat in the local elections, which was a bit of a surprise. And I wouldn't say necessarily because the opposition is great. The opposition is fairly divided as well. You have the supporters of former President Cristina Kirchner, but then you also have some part of the Peronist party who doesn't feel very close to her in that sense. So I wouldn't say it's because the opposition is doing so well. It's just that Milei incredibly divisive. And of course, Trump is a very loyal ally for Milei. And he's even trying to support Argentina financially. More recently, the U.S. Treasury, they did 3 purchases of the Argentinian peso, but it didn't really work out economically because the peso is still falling compared to the dollar. And Trump even said that depending on the result of this particular election, he would decide how much support he will continue giving to Argentina. But it's going to be a big one. So half of the seats in the Chamber of Deputies will be voted in and a third of the Senate. So depending on the result, this could be very problematic for Javier Milei's, remaining years in the presidency. So it's a very challenging one.
And do we know how it plays when Trump that's a pretty direct threat / offer / inducement, isn't it? To say, well, depending on direction of travel, we will or won't put our hands in our pockets. Presumably that plays differently to different demographies. Maybe Malays, hardcore support, quite like it. Imagine lots of particularly moderate Argentines probably thinking, listen, just shove off and leave us to it. I guess we have to wait and see what happens at the ballot box, I guess.
You know what, Tom? I'm realizing here that Trump likes winners because, well,
as he determines them.
Exactly. Because look at Brazil and the US. I mean, do you remember when the US, I think, applied 50% tariffs in Brazil? It was all, we covered this a lot here on Monocle Radio. Now his relationship with Lula warmed up a little bit. Apparently they might meet, I think, in a few days' time as well. So
they literally bumped into each other at the UNGA.
Exactly, and he said, "You're great."
5 seconds.
No, but,
He's so fickle.
And he said, "I had a good vibes from Lula." You know, I mean, they had something going on there.
So if in doubt, just say "Good morning, Mr. President," and that's all you need. Now, Faye, it's interesting. You said this. So much going on, of course, across the region. We could have talked about talking of Trump. He's weighing in on Colombia's president. Not very flattering. In Chile, we're talking about exciting elections in Bolivia.
The far right could.
Chile, that's super interesting. Are we going to talk about any of these significant, consequential geopolitical questions, Faye, or have you got something else up your sleeve?
I was going to, but I'm someone that I change my mind quite quickly. And I thought it would be more interesting to talk about caramel dogs in Brazil, and I will explain that. There's a reason why I'm doing this. There's a new film from Netflix Brazil called Caramelo, which translates as caramel. It's basically the story of a chef who receives a life-changing diagnosis. It's a very sad one. But his dog, called Caramelo, he will help him with hope and fun. And this film has been number 1 in the Netflix kind of top 10 for a few weeks now. So it's the most watched Netflix film not in English everywhere. So people are falling in love with the caramelo. We even have a little trailer, and then we can talk more about the meaning of caramelo, why it matters to Brazilians. Let's play a clip.
Seu filho é o mais novo chefe de cozinha do Ibaia.
Tá tão lindo. Como é que esse cachorro entrou aqui?
Yes,
I can understand the barking. Some of the language there was just too fast for my limited Brazilian Portuguese. Bring us up to speed.
I think Caramelo deserves an Oscar for that. I did see the film. It almost made me cry. Well, it did make me cry, actually. It's quite an emotional film. But let's talk about the caramelo itself. So basically, for those who don't know, they're caramel-colored stray dogs. Every Brazilian knows one or two. They're everywhere, sometimes in the streets, sadly, And in the past, Tom, people were like, oh, it's just a caramelo, People didn't really pay attention to it. But now people are understanding that they are part of Brazilian culture. And that's a fairly recent move, I would say, in the last 5 years or so. Some people are saying that the caramelo should be in our banknotes. Some people say that it means more to Brazilians than carnival or samba. They are really resurging. I think together with the capybaras, honestly,
they are everywhere.
They are everywhere, and that's why this film was made. Honestly, I think people were seeing like the perception of the caramelo. People are like, we should make a film about that, and it worked.
Because we've talked before about the Seleção, right? About Brazil's football team and its kind of mongrel identity. And people say, "Whoa, yes. Tom, you can't say that." But people have been celebrating the fact that the team looks like Brazil. It feels like Brazil. It's a celebration of what Brazil is, and the caramelo dog. It kind of is the same, right? It is the embodiment of this crazy, fun, loyal identity of Brazil's people. And actually, it was kind of a source, as you said, of a bit of shame because these sad dogs were like limping around. But now people are celebrating them. Better news for the caramelos. Will we see them all getting nice homes? Can't they all be living, Shea Pacheco up in Sao Paulo instead?
Honestly, I would love a caramelo living with me here in London. Yes, I think it would change the life because before in Brazil, of course, we're a dog-loving nation and we all love golden retrievers, pedigrees, We're very obsessed with dogs. I think that's time for another story. But now people realize, you know what? They can also have a caramelo, and it's going to be as good as if you have a golden retriever or whatever dog you want to have.
Fernando, I'm going to watch that movie, but I'm not going to do it right now because here on the briefing...
It doesn't die, okay, listeners? You can watch with kids, okay?
Exactly, and we need to ensure that there's not a sad tidings.
Yes.
Faye, I won't be watching that right now because we're going to jet off to Paris on the briefing right after this. We are just ticking towards 20 minutes past midday here in London. We've been to Tokyo, we've been to Sao Paulo, and it is to Paris we head next. I'm delighted to say we're joined from the French capital by the one and only, it's Monocle's editorial director and chairman, Tyler Brûlé. Tyler, are you pleased to see me, or is that a stolen tiara in your pocket?
Bonjour, Tom. Yes, that could be. But I need to go back to our previous segment with our Fernando Augusto particular. Is he our little Monocle Radio Caramello?
I think he possibly is, Tyler. He's given me a thumbs up enthusiastically from behind the glass, where he's fled now. What a delightful film. Are you going to be tuning into that, Tyler? You might have seen it already.
I have not, but I will definitely be tuning in, Tom.
Lovely stuff. Now, listen, I made some flippant remarks. Is everyone still only talking about this extraordinary heist at the Louvre, Tyler? Is that kind of storm broken yet, or is that all the rage? Is that all everyone is talking about, whether it's over their coffees or over their evening aperitivos?
No, actually, because there were proper storms in France last night, and there was a tornado, rather unprecedented. 4 people injured, 1 person killed. Very large crane toppled on top of a building. So actually, a real storm has actually overtaken the Louvre story. And of course, today we also have it's Art Week underway in Paris, and at the same time, we also have Mr. Sarkozy has just gone behind bars in the past few hours as well. So there are other stories which are also, I would say, sort of dominating the news ticker, Tom.
Absolutely, Tyler. Listen, I've got to get your take. You've spent a great deal of time in Paris, of course, over the last kind of 18 months or so. We're talking about, existential crises for the Republic, political kind of volatility. Then you get this crazy crime. It's like a caper. It's like something from Lupin, from Netflix as well. Are people kind of, I don't know, what is the mood? When you sort of dine with friends, colleagues and clients there, Tyler, how are they encapsulating this moment actually for France with you, in all seriousness?
Well, I think if you just touched down or you pulled into the station and you weren't reading Le Figaro, if you weren't reading Les Echos, if you weren't watching BFM TV, Tom, you would have no sense that there is a problem. And of course, this could be said of many places all over the world. But the city is rammed. The world has descended. The art world has descended on Paris right now. And then, of course, it was before this, it was Fashion Week and it was Design Week. So all of the things that France Incorporated plays to, these things are all steaming along, and orders are being taken, and I'm sure that red stickers are being affixed to extraordinary art pieces right now. But then, of course, as you said, go and have a conversation, speak to the French, and there is a real sense of just exasperation. There is frustration on the part of course, of President Macron. So stubborn. Can he please call an election? Can he somehow just unlock and unlock his ego as well to move things forward? And I think this is. Yeah, and again, we're at that time of year as well. We're approaching year end. People want to look towards 2026. What is this going to mean? And I think this idea that, oh my God, we're just in this sort of stalemate situation is of course of enormous frustration, and you do get a sense of dismay. And at the same time, every time Standard & Poor's releases credit ratings, there goes France, and then you see other countries which were formerly basket cases in Europe, on the ascent as well. And of course, this is one of Europe's biggest economies, but not doing very well.
Well, absolutely, Tyler. We'll come back maybe to Brand France for 26 and beyond in just a moment. Just in terms of the art market, and I don't know how much you're going to get to be able to see, but it was striking to me, obviously, here at Frieze. I was talking to Sophie Monaghan-Coombs, and I managed to just dash up there for one afternoon last week. Surprisingly buoyant, and actually talking to a few of the kind of gallerists and various other figures, and we've got a good show this week about the art market report from our friends at Art Basel and UBS coming out as well, which also confirms this. Pretty positive. Lots of works flying off the shelves, and more importantly, the medium to long term view amongst collectors, particularly in the ultra high net worth demography, really, really positive and upbeat, and that goes across generations, and it also spans geographies. Are you expecting to see more of the same? Have you already had those conversations about how robust the art market specifically is in that market? Because I guess Paris specifically, maybe trying to kind of knock Frieze off its perch a little bit.
Well, Tom, I'm not sure if you're tuning into Monocle on Sunday or not. Fantastic program, 9 a.m. your time on a Sunday morning on Monocle Radio, where I was talking to Aurelia Rao, who, of course, is a frequent contributor. And yes, of course, she was saying on one side, are we moving into a place right now where, the rebranded FIAC, that of course, Art Basel Paris, is really trying to chip away at this adjacency, which has always been there between London and Paris with their art weeks. But will we see bigger ticket sales? Will we see, of course, the real spend comes to Paris? I think that's one discussion. But I think the broader topic, as you addressed, which is what is the mood? How is everybody feeling? And certainly it's good. Maybe it's not the same markets that are spending, and we've certainly sort of seen geographical moves, etc. Some countries just not back in the numbers that maybe they were sort of 3 or 4 years ago, or just coming out of the pandemic, let's say. But a feeling that this is a sector, a cultural segment which is doing incredibly well.
And Tyler, just give us some tips. I know our readers and listeners always love to know how from everything from, how you sort of pack your suitcase when you're doing, 3 continents in 7 days, this kind of thing. How do you plan for Paris when there's so much going on? Not just Design Miami, you've got Art Basel, you've got all that, your Monocle and other hats you're wearing as well. How do you run your diary? Because I was frankly surprised and delighted to manage to detain you even just for this brief moment in our studios, of course, on Rue Bachemont. But how do you go about ensuring that you're getting everywhere you need to be when you've only got a few days to do it?
Tom, what are you talking about? You've locked me in. I'm doing the entire show from here on Thursday. So somehow I thought, listen, as you said, I'm nipping in very quickly, 1:15 on a Tuesday. Then I look at my diary and somehow someone's hijacked a full 30 minutes on Thursday. So anyway, yeah, listen, if this is also people like purring very nicely to my new assistant, Andre, as well, whether that's in Brazilian Portuguese or Porto Portuguese, I don't know. Anyway, I don't know what's going on. With the diary, but it's working in your favor. That's what we can say.
Yeah,
I thought you were actually going to ask me about how am I packing, and that was sort of a challenge this morning because I just came from Tokyo. I've got some of your colleagues are inbound to Paris tomorrow because we're going to have a bit of a briefing. Listen, I hate to check in, and I really don't want to check in luggage. And of course, normally I take the train, but I bought one of those plane tickets to Tokyo. If you originate elsewhere in Europe and you fly via your home hub, of course, you can have actually quite substantial savings. So I started in Paris and I'm sort of returning to Paris. So I had to fly this morning and I had to check luggage because I've got so many bloody Japanese magazines and so many clippings and so many things I want to show to our creative director, Richard Spencer Powell, that I really had to organize myself last night like some nana at about 8:30 in the evening to make sure when I woke up at 5 a.m. this morning, Tom, 4 a.m. your time, to make my way here, that I had everything I needed. I'm fully prepared for our creative director about this time tomorrow. So also thank you very much for not booking me to do tomorrow's show.
It's my pleasure, and I'll let Rich know to await further instruction. You're not jetting back to Tokyo just in a couple of weeks? I don't know if you heard Fiona at the top of the show talking about, we now have definitively our first female Prime Minister in Tokyo. Are you headed there? Start early next month? And what will be on the agenda for that one whilst we're rattling through your diary?
Well, yes, I will be back there's a couple of things. We've got a big event coming up in Singapore. For our listeners in Hong Kong, I'm going to be doing a talk at the Foreign Correspondents Club at the Hong Kong FCC. That's on the 6th. Not the main reason I'm there. Well, Tom, I might do a little book signing, of course, for our Designers on Sofas book as well. And then I will be back in Tokyo as well, because there's also a lot of Japan things on the go. December, January issue coming up. We're going to have a Japan survey in that issue. So that's also on the cards as well. And by the way, I don't know if you should have seen this. It was a little bit like sort of being in your uncle's recreation room, maybe in a suburban basement somewhere in Michigan. Doesn't have to sound as weird as I might have painted it right now. Anyway, but that was the setup, Tom, in our mini conference room in Tokyo last week, where I was anchoring the briefing as well. First time we've sort of done it, in that sort of format and setting, and I have to say it worked incredibly well.
It was a delight, and we had some friends, old and new, joining us. So it's a terrific show. So Tyler, we'll hear from you next on Thursday. I shall leave you to your busy.
Listen. Somehow, if you manage to intercept my diary between now and then, Tom, you might hear from me tomorrow, maybe later this afternoon. I don't know.
I shall watch with bated breath. That's our Tyler Brûlé on the line from our studios in the City of Lights. Thanks to Tyler. Do listen out for more from him in the days ahead, but that's all we have time for on this Tuesday edition of The Briefing, which was expertly produced by Laura Kramer and Ryuma Takahashi. Our researcher was Joanna Moser. Our studio manager was Steph Chungu, with editing assistance from Elliot Greenfield. My thanks to them, one and all. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Never miss an edition. That is your Tuesday Briefing. I'm Tom Edwards. Thanks very much for tuning in.